degrees and freezing. But the sun did peek through the clouds today. I mean, I'm doubling up on my vitamin D. In the wintertime, when you get a winter like this, you need to double up on your vitamin D. Cold really takes it out of you. Anyway, I'm going to talk about something here, and it's going to be a sensitive subject. It's called abortion. I'm going to talk about abortion because we need to talk about that. We need to talk about it with how we feel about it, what we think about it, the facts surrounding it, and how we need to respect each other's personal opinions and viewpoints on it. But I'm going to refer to it as AB because I don't want my live to get cut off if I continue saying the word. But first I'm going to start out by talking about men's rights, because I don't want anybody to think that I am one of these women that, it's all about women's rights and fuck men and all that. No. What kind of world would that be? Needs to be fair, needs to be respectful. So I'm going to tell you first a story about something that happened many years ago. I have sisters that are, 15 years older than me. One day I was out with my sister, and her son had just recently got divorced. And he was living with her. And she started telling me that he was living with her because he couldn't afford to live on his own. And I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? He works for General Motors. How in the heck can a guy that works for General Motors not be able to afford to live on his own? Well, this is how it happened. He had married a woman. They had 2 children. They were married for about 6 years, 7 years. During that period of time, she worked. Because you got to remember, Canada has daycare that's paid for. So it's not, it doesn't cost a lot of money to put your kid at a daycare. Now, if you make a lot of money, you probably have to pay a little bit more. But if you don't make much, there's ways around it. And she always worked, and she worked in an office for an agro producer company. So she had a pretty good little job herself. Their daughter was born with cerebral palsy. But that daughter is now an adult. She's married. And she has a full, happy life. At the time they got the divorce, of course, he wanted to handle it himself. And what she did to him was unbelievable. A lot of times with guys, they don't want to make a fuss over divorce. They want to just get it done, and they'll agree to anything, especially if it's concerning their children. So we asked him, my sister and I asked him, can we take a look at your paperwork concerning your divorce? And he said, yeah, and we couldn't believe it. So after looking over the paperwork, we asked him, do you want to do this again? He said, well, what would be the sense in it? And we said, well, you'd be able to live in your own place. And he said, I don't want to take away from my children. I said, well, you won't be taken away from your kids. Your kids will be fine. So he said, sure. So my sister and I went to the courthouse and we gathered up the necessary paperwork, came back home, and went to work. See, what this woman did to him was she used her handicapped child and his heartstrings and pride to leave him with nothing to live on. And rather than him look like he wasn't a good provider in court, he allowed it to be done. So what I mean by that is, once she'd filed for separation, she quit working. Immediately upon separating from him. Then on top of that, his daughter used to need knee braces and then wrist braces through a period of life while she was growing. And of course, those are all provided for free by the Canadian government. And on top of it, he worked for General Motors, so he had one hell of a good insurance plan. But instead, every sort of apparatus that was needed for his daughter, it wasn't just the normal. It had to be dyed in pink with butterflies on it, and it's like buying something that works from a store versus something that works with a Gucci label on it. And when it came to the cost of items that the judge asked, this is the type of things that the cost she would put in. Then on top of that, she demanded a certain amount of child support or spousal support because she wasn't working at the time of the divorce. Then she did other things like claim that they had dietary needs. And I grew up with this girl. She had no dietary needs at all. But there was all these, she had to have a special type of milk. She was allergic to this, allergic to that. She had made him carry an insurance policy on the children. I can't remember. It was a ridiculous, I joked around with him and I said, Jesus, I hope you don't end up dead. Because that's enough, for her to start over pretty well on. But anyway, she did all these little things that's required for you to prove in a divorce when you got kids. That courts asked for, except she didn't fraudulently put in the cost of things. She put in the cost of things that, she just blew it way out of proportion. And then on top of that, the standard child support that she would have gotten for his daughter, it was double because of her disability. Now keep in mind, this girl grew up to be perfectly fine. She's got a little bit of a limp in her one wrist. She's married. She's been married for about 3 years now. And then she even went to the point of had his insurance from General Motors paying for her glasses. It was just insane. So, and all he did was agree to it because he was a man. He worked at General Motors. He didn't want to tell anybody, I'm not fighting my wife because of my, I have a disabled child and I'm too cheap to give her anything. But at the end of it all, he wasn't even left with enough to rent an apartment and make a car payment. It took 2.5 or 3 years to get all of that undone to what would have been considered a reasonable divorce. Oh, and he even left her the house, which he had to make payments on because his kids lived there, and he wasn't going to go tell other men that he wasn't paying for a roof over his children's head. Anyway, it took, like I said, almost 3 years to get all that undone in the courts. And my sister and I did that. We didn't hire a lawyer because it was a lawyer that had him settle for the first agreement. So you can't always trust your lawyers either. But during that period of time, I really got to see how women use children to live off men. So not only when they're with the man, but they're living off the man afterwards. The man, they pass it off as child support and spousal support. But truthfully, a lot of times it leaves, it leaves the man in such a bad state that they can't even make the payments that the court requires them to pay. And once they don't pay that, then next thing you know, you don't pay your child support here in Canada, then you're in court. And after a while, if you can't make those payments, they take your license. And then once they take your license, well, you can't work. So I know men get hit pretty hard in some areas too. And women should stop doing that. And the ones that are, you know who you are. Now, they've changed it in recent years. You don't get away with it anymore. In the country I'm in, women are held a lot more accountable for the financial support of their children than they used to be. That was the thing. See, the laws had changed. Women had got all these rights, but the financial part of it was still put on, too much of the financial part of it was put on men. And it took a while for that to balance itself out. And these days it's pretty much balanced out. But it really gave me sympathy towards what a lot of young men went through. And those young men are now young parents themselves, or they're adults. And a lot of young men nowadays are terrified to get with a woman because they grew up, hi Hoot and Nanny Mike, they grew up in pretty volatile home situations. And they know, if she gets pregnant, then they're responsible 2009 over here in Canada, I literally watched a woman pick up a guy at a bar. She was 4 months pregnant. She brought him home. They lived common law. Keep in mind, she had 4 children at the time. She was pregnant, or no, sorry, she had 3. She was pregnant with her 4th. And when that child was born, she got pregnant again. And when she sent off the birth certificates to the government, she sent off the one that was his, which was the last one. And she also sent off the one that was the one she was pregnant with when she met him. And he had no idea. So when she divorced him a couple years later, not only did he end up paying support for his biological child, he paid full support for the one that wasn't his. He paid full support, and he paid partial support for the ones he had been supporting, because the way the government looked at the laws, looked at it here in Canada, is the child should not suffer because of a divorce. He ended up having to move back in with his parents, and he ended up living with his parents until his parents died. So no, men, there's a lot of men out there that have a lot of anger towards women, and I do understand it to a certain degree. So that's my story, and I'm telling you, I'm not one of these women that are, oh, I hate men and men need to suffer and fuck men and all that. Don't feel that way at all. But I do want to talk about abortion, or AB, and how I feel about it. Well, first of all, I think people need to mind their own damn business. I do not think using the Bible to justify saying to some 13-year-old girl that her daddy's been fucking her, who's pregnant, that she's got to give birth to the kid, is right. And I'll tell you why that is. You can look it up, because I'm not going to. There is part of the Bible that talks about abortion. They call it bitter water. So type in bitter water, Bible, and it might come up. But what it talks about is, if your wife screws around on you and gets knocked up, in order for the man not to have to deal with the shame, that he can send his wife to the temple, and they will mix up a concoction of what they call bitter water, and it will make her womb writhe and heave and get rid of the baby. It's called an abortion. So, it talks about abortion in the Bible. And it does not say that abortion is a sin, that abortion is going to condemn you to hell. As a matter of fact, the Bible doesn't really say anything about abortion. I'm not 100% on this, correct me if I'm wrong, but the Bible says something about the only sin that's unforgivable is blasphemy. I might be wrong about that, but I think murder's forgivable. So no, I don't believe that that's a reasoning or a rational reason to stop any woman from getting an AB. I think that should be left up to the individual the family, and the doctor. The priest has no business near that at all. I do not believe that it is a judgment on any woman that gets one. I remember before Roe versus Wade, when you could not get one. You had to go to a hospital. And of course, in the United States, you always had to pay for it. And due to that, many women died. Many babies were left to die at death and buried somewhere out in the woods. I had a friend in school, high school. Her name was Dee Dee. And she got pregnant. And rather than tell her family, because she was so afraid and shame, she ended up taking a handful of pills. And she almost died. She was in a coma. They had to cut her throat, and the only thing, she was breathing through a machine for a while. And then when the baby was born, it had a lot of problems. All because of the shame. She was so afraid. She couldn't live with the fact in a small town that she would have to live there knowing people would know that she had an abortion, or knowing her family, parents knowing. The funny thing about that is her parents were they were a couple of drunks. And Dee Dee ended up, by the time she was 40, committing suicide. So right now, what's happened over in America, as Trump has reversed Roe versus Wade, you can still get an AB, but you have to be able to afford it. And he's left the decision as to whether it's legal or not up to the states. And what that basically boils down to is, if you live in the poorest states, in the poorest communities in the United States, you can't get an abortion. Unless you can afford to pay for it, to do an overnight stay somewhere. Whereas a lot of people living in those states can barely afford to eat. So there's going to be a lot of babies being born. I like to call those the Trump babies, that are going to be unwanted, born to young mothers who aren't even adults themselves, who have no financial means or are emotionally capable of taking care of a child. So I am totally against that. You've gone backwards. And it doesn't hurt anyone else, any other country, except America. I mean, how in the future is that going to look? I know a bit, but at the time when all that was happening before, there were social programs. Things were a little bit better. Things weren't so crazy, unaffordable. There weren't drugs all over like there are now. But now, pretty much half of America is right back in there like that, in an economy where people can't afford to live. It's going to cause crime to go through the roof. So, no, I don't think that was a very good decision. And I don't think you can justify it with the Christian Bible. You did see Dr. Oz come on and say, you want to have those Trump babies? Oh, you want to? I swear to God, the rest of the women in the world just cringed when he said that. Guy in charge of your health care is a TV doctor. Now, I heard today that there's all sorts of shit flying all over Fox News and the radio and American news that Trump's better not piss off Donald Trump. Or they're saying that Mark Carney better not piss off Donald Trump. That Mark Carney called Donald Trump. It's absolute bullshit. Mark Carney is doing nothing but spending every bit of his time trying to secure Canada, trying to get better deals for Canada, keep Canada together, move Canada forward. And these characters, like that, what's his name? Ludnick? Wasn't he Canadian? Yeah. He was a Canadian grifter who made lots of money, and we got tired of him, and he ended up over there. Same as, what's his name? Jordan Peterson. Right down the road from me is Western University. And I used to go watch Jordan Peterson all the time because he would teach classes there, and then he would have debates there, and the public was welcome to come. And back in the day, he was amazing, quite the guy. And I don't want to discredit him because he really woke a lot of people up, opened up a lot of people's eyes. But then he had a nervous breakdown. It was almost like he got to the point he became so sure of himself and that everything he said was right, and he just knew more than everybody else. He became too much, and he felt that he was above everybody else, and he could no longer teach because he was at the point he wanted to teach some of his shit, which started becoming like, what do you guys call it over there? QAnon theorists, where they believe crazy shit. And the universities said, look, you can't do that. If you're not, you got to stick to the facts. Because he had become so popular and so famous that he was pretty much allowed to teach anything he wanted until the cracks started showing. The more famous he got, the crazier he got. And then he had a complete nervous breakdown. And the way he puts it nowadays is that he was not allowed to uh, speak the way he wanted to speak. That's not true. He could hold a rally or rent out any public place he wanted to and say whatever the fuck he wanted. But when he was teaching, he had to stick to a certain curricula. And he didn't like that. So he basically wanted to tell an entire university that he was going to come in and run his classes the way he seen fit, and they were supposed to pay him millions of dollars a year. And they did try to negotiate with him and said, look, we love you, it's great, but there are some things that we can't be dealing with at a university level because they're not proven fact, they're not science. And he simply wouldn't go along with it. And then he had a complete nervous breakdown and decided to move to the United States. So we know who he is, and we know his situation, and we don't hang off every word he says, and we don't believe everything he says is written in stone. A lot of it is just stuff he believes, but the way he relays it is though it's fact, and it's not. And unless you're super intelligent and have spent most of your adult life in school, you're probably not going to understand you're probably not going to be sure if what he's saying is fact. I know I wouldn't be. I just know sometimes I catch him at stuff, and that's kind of what happened over here. So I don't want to discredit him as a speaker, a philosopher, a psychologist, and all the things he is good at. But at the same time, I'm not going to say that he's at the top of his game anymore. And then he went over to the United States and he got his hair done and he got some Botox and now he's a new man, I guess. I don't know. I don't even know where I was going with that. But anyway, something else I want to talk about was Ecuador. So you know how we all have consulates in our countries. So you got a Canadian consulate over there, we got an American one here, and throughout the different states and whatnot, and over here throughout the different provinces. Every country has different consulates from all over the world. And those are supposed to be and agreed upon and have been for decades as secure areas. So even in wartime, you can't bring your war bullshit, your fighting and all that into a consulate building. Well, ICE stormed the Ecuadorian council building in Minnesota today. And that's not good. Now, if ICE gets away with this, the Ecuador's already wrote a letter to Trump and said, listen, this better not happen again. But if it does, what's going to happen is our consulates are going to start pulling out of different countries, out of the United States. So every consulate, there's a Danish consulate, there's a British, every country in the world has a consulate over the United States. We have a consulate over the United States. We're just going to start pulling our consulates out. What's the sense in them being there? And the other thing that happened too, yesterday I believe, one of the bigger executives of FIFA, the World Cup. They're saying with this ice being over in the United States that it's not safe for people from other countries to be there. Because ice is considered to be rogue. They're considered to be Gestapo. So people that are paying thousands of dollars from other countries to watch the big World Cup soccer game in the United States are already starting to collect the insurance and back at it going. That's going to cost United States millions of dollars. The other thing that happened is the Olympics, the Winter Olympics. Well, the hockey rink that they were building for the Winter Olympics is still not done. And they're saying at this point, they're not sure if they're going to have enough time to build it to spec. So they want to cut it back 3 feet and something about the quality of ice, which makes it unsafe for players. And it will not be an official ice rink. Be like cutting back a quarter of a football field. So the alarm's been sounded for the Winter Olympics as to what's going to go on with hockey. What else is there out there that they've been saying that's changed? Oh, Amazon announced that they are now cutting their staff another 15,000 people. And they're hoping by the end of 2026 for it to be 30,000. It's all being replaced by AI. So I looked and looked and looked for anything just good to come out of the United States today. Like, oh, this new factory opened up or something. You guys got a check. And I couldn't find one thing, not one. At this point in time, United States, Canada is basically no longer in the big three of car building. We've got a bunch of EVs coming in. We've done that because we cannot trust Donald Trump to keep his word. So what's the sense in making a deal with you? Every time he doesn't get what he wants to hold another country ransom. So right now, as it stands, United States is in it with Mexico. You're in the car building business with Mexico. A country that you're attacking, that Trump's attacking its citizens all the time. And I watched a debate And I honestly could not believe, this guy came on and said that Mark Purdy deserved to die. That it's his fault for being out there. And not only that, he took it one step farther. He was asked about the woman in the pink coat or the pink backpack. And this blew my mind. This is MAGA's way of thinking. MAGA, this MAGA dude, he was asked, well, if that's your attitude, that they weren't allowed to be out in the street, that she was not allowed to be out in the street. This guy said, well, she was screaming and yelling. So she's an American citizen, and she was screaming and yelling. And because of that, this MAGA dude believed that she deserved to be knocked down, and Purdy deserved to be shot. So he was asked the question, if your girlfriend or significant other was in that position, she was yelling and screaming and acting a fool, as he said, does that mean she should have been shot? And he said, yeah. And then the person asked him again, he said, you mean if you would have been there, because Alex Purdy was protecting this girl. If this woman was your significant other, you would not have protected her. And he said, no, she would have got what she deserved. And Mark Purdy got what he deserved for protecting her. She fucked around and found out. This is what MAGA men think of women. First of all, you got what you deserved because you were out there in the first place. Second of all, you got what you deserved because you were screaming and waving your hands, and how dare you? And Alex Purdy lost his life because of that woman. Alex Purdy lost his life because a murderous, untrained individual, two of them, shot him 9 times in broad daylight because Americans are not standing up for their rights. And that's why. Hello, wonderful. Hello, wonton lover. That's why. Now, I want you to think about that. She's an American citizen. He didn't think she shouldn't have been out in those streets. How dare she? She's a woman. She's an American citizen. Well, she was screaming, waving her hands, acting like a fool. And Alex Purdy got what he deserved for protecting her. See, you guys got it completely backwards. Those people you see out there risking their lives in the freezing cold, are the patriots. Do you think back when the Declaration and all of that was being done, when they put in the Second Amendment, they gave every American citizen, not just men, every, to bear right, to bear arms, and protect themselves against a tyrannical government. So, was it John Brown? Remember all that you learned it in high school? When people rose up to protect themselves against the tyrannical government in the United States in the historical past, they didn't have tear gas, they didn't have, high-tech gear. They had rocks, sticks, you name it. They were, and they still did it. They were the patriots. They risked their lives for freedom for all. You guys have it completely backwards over there. Anyway, I'm going to let y'all go. Oh, no, I have an ear infection. That won't work. I get them all the time. I'll tell you the story behind that. I was out swimming one day. I came home. Later on that night, I laid down. In the middle of the night, I got up because I was going to go put a log on the fire. And I went to lay back down, and I heard this big pop in my ear. And ever since that, I've had, they call it swimmer's ear, and I have to go on antibiotics. I've had surgery for it before, but it comes and it goes. And I can take medication to get rid of it. But when I do that, the medication gets me high, and I don't like being, I don't need to be high. Not in a good way. I can't sleep for like 24 hours. It's like I'm taking speed or something. So what happens is I don't know, right now I've got an infection. And it kind of drains and screws up my throat and blocks my ear canal. But I'll go to the doctor, I'll get some antibiotics, and it'll be gone. But thank you for your concern, Wonton Lover. I appreciate that. So, I was having a discussion today. I guess somebody was watching the Chris and Holly show. Or what's he call himself now? Dang right. He's got some homeless dude living with him. I'm going to check that out later on. But I can't stress to people enough to keep an open mind. Like it blew my mind, everything I watched today on television coming out of the United States or coming out of Fox News was just absolute bullshit. There was no phone call from Carney. That was a lie. What's his name? Scott Bassett coming out and saying on Fox News, oh, we better not scare Trump or upset Trump. Well, here, how about this? Fuck you, Trump. Sit on it and spin. And he's not going to dictate to us whether we can deal with China or not. He can go fuck himself on that too. We have a very good deal with China. And China's pleased and we're pleased. If Trump's not pleased, he shouldn't have been such an asshole. But and who's he threatening tonight? He's threatening some other country. Oh, Iran. He's threatening Iran tonight. And then on top of it, I guess he did a thing in Iowa that um, after his rally, he walked into a restaurant. People were in there eating, enjoying their food. And he walked into a restaurant and just assumed that everybody would want to listen to him. And he had some reporters with him. And they actually, um, he, he started insulting the reporter in this restaurant. Like, the arrogance of this guy is unbelievable. And it didn't go over well. So that's all I got to say today. And I would love to hear your opinions. And please subscribe. And let's talk about uncomfortable stuff. Let's talk about stuff we're all afraid to talk about to each other. I'm not afraid to have a conversation with somebody who believes abortion is bad because of their biblical beliefs. Matter of fact, I respect that. That's fine if that's how you want to live. And we need to be able to have these conversations without getting pissy with each other. At least I'm hoping we can. I know I can. Bye now.